Now that the backyard has been prepared, are you ready to see us assemble the Stimson bow shed? The number one most essential part of starting any project is read the effing instructions.
The plans for the Stimson bow shed are pretty cheap, $20 US, and give you worksheets and photos of how to build the bows and set up the shed. Link is in the card above and in the description.
The maximum width for the bow shed, according to the plans, is 20 feet wide and as long as you want to make it. I couldn't find 20-foot lengths of 1x3, and I had to splice in an extra 4 feet to the 16-footers available from the local lumber store.
2-part epoxy glue was used along the 16-ounce biaxial fabric to join the 1x3s together. Once the first prototype was finished, layups of multiple bows were produced.
The inner layer is first bent into shape and held to the form blocks with clamps. Next, the filler blocks, which are 2x3s, are screwed and glued with PL Premium. Once that's done, the outer layer of strapping is added, glued, and screwed. I let these sit for about 10 minutes so the adhesive would sit up a bit.
You will likely encounter some breakage as you assemble the bows. This is normal. We had no way to steam such large pieces, and it really wasn't necessary. They were soaked with garden hose and covered in a dark blue tarp. They steamed themselves in the sun.
It took 2 days to assemble all the bows, 20 in all, as the center span was doubled, which gave us a shed 20 feet wide and 32 feet long. You can see the ledgers that will support the bottom of the bows laid out around the perimeter. Save all your offcuts for diagonal bracing and framing openings, etc.
Bows are fastened to the ridge, which are 2x8s, with glue and screws. This is the first of 4 sections that will be assembled, each 16 feet long.
Small strips of old carpet are used as a makeshift hinge and screwed to the bows and ridge. This makes it easy for just a couple of people to lift them into place. I didn't have a stepladder high enough to reach the ridge of the shed, so I assembled one. I called it the Tower of Pain and Suffering. I must have climbed this thing 1,000 times in 2 days just to get the shed up.
Detail at the ridge connection. This is the aft section that will get walked back into position so the forward section can be raised. You can see the butt splice block, pre-drilled for carriage bolts.
This picture shows the aft 2 bows in place. 2 sets of hands moved it back into position, and 2 more sets of hands guided the bottom of the bows into place on the ledger. Once placed, the bottoms of the bows are fastened to the ledger with carriage bolts. Here I am up on the tower, gluing and screwing the bows to the ridge. At this point, the structure is still pretty flimsy. The forward set of bows attached together at the ridge and being walked in together. The bottom of the bows on the left are set onto the ledger as she goes up. Once at height, the bottom of the bows on the right are also set on the ledger.
Joining the 2 sections of bows together at the center span with butt blocks and carriage bolts.
Another view of the bows in their raised position. You can see some of the longitudinal bracing going in now. The entire structure was constantly checked for plumb and square before all the bracing was glued and screwed into position.
The structure is almost complete. Horizontal and diagonal bracing is in place and the ends are being framed in. The structure is incredibly strong at this point, but more will be added later. The next step is covering the shed.
The first bit of heat shrink plastic going up. I will say here that this type of plastic is not intended for this type of use. The only reason I bought it was A, it was cheap, and I got a whole roll, about 300 linear feet by 16 feet wide, enough to probably cover the whole shed 10 times over. As it turned out, this was a huge mistake. More on that in a following episode.
The front of the shed will have barn-style doors, each 8 feet high and 5 feet wide. The simplest, easiest, and cheapest way to make them was just 2x4 frames with some diagonal bracing and covered in shrink wrap.
Shrinking the plastic was a bit of a challenge. I didn't have the proper heat gun to do it, and this was my only choice. Again, another bad decision. More on that later. I decided to try it out on the doors where, if I effed it up, it would be easily replaced on the ground.
A bit of a burn through. We knew right then the blue shrink plastic was a mistake, but we're far into it now. Luckily, we had the foresight to purchase a couple of rolls of the repair tape as well. It all looked really good when it was assembled and shrunk tight. Having a little more confidence, we carried on. If I remember correctly, this is how we left it at the end of day 1.
Day 2, and the sides are now getting covered. The best way to join the two pieces of plastic together is with a heat gun, sort of welding them together. To this day, 15 years later, those joints were still holding strong until we replaced the sides last summer.
The plastic was fastened to the ridge with a batten and plenty of staples and screws.
Starting to weld the two side panels together, starting at the ridge. This was a bit tricky to get it tight. You can see how sloppy the plastic is in the sun. The longitudinal strapping is strong enough to hold me, so all I had to do was climb down one rung, 2 feet at a time.
South side complete. We switched over and did the north side. Then shrink it all together at one time. North side ready for plastic. You can see how sloppy the unshrunk plastic is at this point.
Rolled up plastic, ready to be unfurled across the length of the shed. This was done from the outer edges to meet in the middle, same as the south side.
The process of welding the seams was identical to the other side, with the small exception of the doorway built into the side of the shed. This doorway made it easier to get to and from the garden shed, where a lot of the boat parts and tools were stored.
The process to heat shrink all the plastic didn't get photographed. I believe I did it all on my own, and I didn't have a free hand for the camera. But the results at this point looked really good. If you enjoyed this trip back to the early days of our boat building project, please give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss the next episode. An old man sits outside his boat shed with his faithful cat, Chester, contemplating his unfulfilled dream of cruising North America's waterways with his loving wife. With the help of dear friends and supporters on Patreon, he finds a glimmer of hope to finish building their boat and fulfill their long-awaited adventures. Bring joy and excitement to their golden years. Won't you join them and see this dream actually be fulfilled?
Rick and I would like to thank you for spending your time with us going over all the old pictures. A lot of this work had almost been forgotten, and it's worth scrolling through the photo folders once in a while, if just for old time's sake. Next time, we'll have a look at the work that went into outfitting the inside of the boat shed the following spring. Stand by.